Halloween is my favorite time of the year, and more than anything I love to decorate my front yard. It all started when I was a kid. My parents always had elaborate decorations and I kept that trend going with my own family. It bonded us and I just loved doing it. And on top of that, my neighborhood had a bit of a reputation for going all out on Halloween. It was the perfect fit. Each year there was an informal competition between the houses on my street. When we had first moved into the neighborhood, we kind of set the standard for decorations. My graveyard scenes were always elaborate, but when we moved into this house, I went above and beyond. I added touches of flair, lights, smoke, some small animatronics. I really made a life-size diorama out of it. I easily won the challenge the first 5 years. But after that 5th year, everybody else on our street upped their games. Before too long, our street was the most trick-or-treated street in the town. Honestly, it was a sight to behold. So many people coming together to scare the living hell out of each other. It was sweet, in a horror movie kind of way. It was around this time that the Johnsons had moved in down the street. Tim and Joyce and their little boy, Joey. They are the nicest people. His wife makes an amazing lemon bar, and we're great friends, 11 months out of the year. But around Halloween time, the Johnsons become my sworn enemies. Tim and Joyce work for a theme park. I'll let you guess which one. And they went all out on the holidays. The first year they had their own graveyard scene that was, to be honest, nothing short of amazing. It far outdid my unearthed graves. It was clear that they had won the contest. I took it in stride, but the next day, I started planning on what I could do for the following year. It was petty, I know, but I wanted to win. I've lost 5 years running. Last week at the barbecue, Tim let it slip that they were working on a lab scene. I have tried that the last few years, but the results were always mixed. I decided that I wanted to go back to the graveyard scene. In my spare time, I had been looking at more how-to videos about creating more lifelike decorations, how to build cheap but effective animatronics, scouring Craigslist for supplies, and looking at various Pinterest boards. I know, I wanted to punch myself too, in order to have the best looking yard. I felt that with all the decorations I already had, the ones I had found on Craigslist and my new knowledge, I was ready to win it all again. The Johnsons be damned. This was my year. The week before I was going to break out the decorations and get started, we had one of the most intense thunderstorms we'd ever had in these parts. I felt like at any minute, I would look out my window and I would see the Wicked Witch flying by on a broom. We made plans just in case a tornado touched down, but nothing but hard rain had fell. When the storm finally ceased, I went into the garage to prepare my decorations and I was gutted. The roof in the garage had leaked right above where I stored my supplies. Everything was ruined. My hopes of winning back my crown were dashed in a heartbeat. For a minute, I thought that maybe this was for the best. I had spent a lot of spare time planning for this, and I had a honeydew list that was growing by leaps and bounds. Maybe I was too into the competition. This was probably healthy. I was planning on telling my family that we'd just do a simple display this year, but then my kids spent the night at their friend's house and my wife worked late. I was alone and I had the entire internet to help me solve my problem. I decided as a last-ditch effort to see what cheap supplies I could find online. If there was nothing, I'd just throw in the towel. And that's when I saw an ad on Craigslist that caught my attention. I can't keep these things anymore. Halloween. It was weird enough to warrant a click, and I am glad that I did. Inside, somebody was getting rid of years' worth of Halloween decorations. I called right away and I told them that I'd be there in 10 minutes to pick it up. The house was a bit off the beaten path, but nothing too crazy. The owner, on the other hand, tiptoed into Nutsoville. She said that her name was Shade, which whatever, it's a Craigslist buy, that she was going to be moving soon. There wasn't any moving boxes or anything, and I didn't know if she was being honest, but I didn't care. She told me that she had held onto these things for as long as she could, but she had to get rid of them for now. There were several trunks. I had hit the mother load. I pulled out my wallet and she stopped me. She said that I could have them for free. I asked to see what was inside, but she really didn't want me opening them there. She said that they were so tightly packed it might cause a mess. I wanted to make sure I wasn't inheriting somebody's junk, so I insisted. She sighed and ducked back into the house. When she returned, I noticed she had put on a handmade necklace. I asked her about it, but she either didn't hear me or she just ignored me. It was probably some Etsy thing, so I just let it slide and I opened the first trunk. There were bones. Not a complete skeleton, but odds and ends. Some cloaks, cauldrons, headstones. It was incredible. They were high quality stuff too. I asked again if she wanted anything for them and she said no. I shrugged, loaded them into my truck, and I thanked her for the supplies. She muttered something under her breath and then slammed the front door. I wanted to get as far away from shade as possible, so I bolted home. When I got there, I dragged everything into the garage and I unloaded it. It was better than I could have ever hoped for. There were at least 5 full skeletons, 2 witch hats, a few brooms, lanterns, vials with red and blue and green water in them, and so much more. I sketched out a design I wanted for the yard and I was pleased with myself. I might not have the animatronics that I'd wanted, but these look so good, I might not need it. I had started setting up the yard when my wife got home with the kids. They were jazzed by the props, but my wife was confused. I told her that all my old supplies had gotten ruined in the storm and I had gotten all of these from online. I told her it was a kismet. She seemed dubious though. I swore that I hadn't spent a dime on one, save for the cost of gas to pick them up. And as an added bonus, we got 5 new steamer trunks for free. They could be antiques and we could sell them. She was kind of put off by the whole thing. They looked too real and it made her sick to her stomach. Something about all of this was off, and I assured her that it was nothing. I thought that if I showed her the trunks, she might come around, but she didn't. She was looking over them and agreed that they were old, but they made her feel worse. Along the side of the trunk, she noticed something carved into the wood. It was a cross instead of the circle instead of a triangle. I told her that it was probably just some old identification thing. Maybe it was the hobo code from the 1930s. These trunks were that old, but she didn't want to hear it. She told me that I could keep them for the year, but then I would have to get rid of them. It was too much. Everybody would think that we had robbed a crypt or something. I must have spent all day working on my scene. 2 skeleton witches raising the bodies of a few fallen comrades crawling out of the grave, while 2 of the minions held lanterns. Because next thing I knew, the sun was gone and my porch light kicked on. I sat back and I admired the scene. It was good and it looked real. I grabbed a lighter and I lit up all the lanterns. The orange gave the whole scene an eerie glow. The final touch? I placed those witch hats on the skeletons. It looked unsettling. I loved it. Before I was done, Tim came jogging by. He stopped and he let out a whistle. He was impressed. He asked if he could get a closer look at the skeletons and I let him. He messed around with the bones and looked the skeletons up and down. He shook his head. "These are amazing." "Thanks," I said, beaming. "I picked them up this morning." "From where?" "Ah," I said. "A magician doesn't reveal his secrets." "It looks like I have to pull out all the stops," he said, nodding goodbye and continuing with his jog. As he ran away, I muttered half-jokingly, "So long, Nemesis." I went inside for a few beers, some TV, and a deep, satisfied sleep. It was about 3 in the morning when my daughter started screaming from across the house. I dashed up and I found her outside of her bedroom door in tears. I asked her what was wrong and all she could say was that somebody was looking at her window. I grabbed a bat and I went out of the front door. There wasn't anyone there, but somebody was looking into her window. It was one of the skeleton witches. I walked over to the decorations and I looked down at the ground. There were footprints around the window and it looked like the skeleton had been dragged from where he had been. I figured that it was neighborhood kids pulling a prank. It wouldn't have been the first time they messed around, and I dragged the skeleton back to its spot. The next day, when I went out for work, I noticed that one of the skeletons that was on the ground seemed to have been moved around. His bones were a bit more scattered than before. And again, there were footprints, but nothing much else. I thought about getting security cameras, but then I remembered how much they cost. This was just a temporary problem. In less than a month, this would all be over. That night, around midnight, I was sitting in my living room half paying attention to whatever Netflix show I was watching and bullshitting around online. That's when I heard something move outside. I glanced up and I nearly had a heart attack. Someone had put the witch skeleton in the living room window. After I collected myself, I listened and heard hushed whispering outside in the front yard. The kids were still there. I decided to repay the favor and scare the hell out of them. I went around my back door and I snuck outside. It was colder than I thought. I could see my breath. It hadn't been cold inside. I tiptoed to the gate and I quietly opened it. I walked softly along the side of my house, waiting to jump out and scare the kids. Right as I got to the edge of the house, I heard more hushed whispering, and they were still there. I psyched myself up and then I jumped out from my hiding spot, screaming like a goddamn madman. One of the skeleton witches fell to the ground and I heard what sounded like footsteps on pavement run in the opposite direction. And down the street I saw two figurines running away, or so it seemed. I was pissed that I couldn't get a good view of them, and that they had come back a second time. I decided to call the cops. Naturally, when the cops showed up, they looked bored with my story. They said absence of any kind of evidence, they couldn't really do anything. They could increase the amount of patrols to the neighborhood, but that was about it. They looked at the footprints and agreed that somebody had been there, but they just hopped back into their squad car and they rolled away. And the next night, we managed to make it through without incident. I started to think that maybe my impromptu and scary night had worked. But the following night, I heard voices again from outside of my window. They had come back. Instead of scaring, I caught out on one and I waited for the red and blue lights to come cruising by. When they finally did, 3 hours later, the kids had left. It was the same cops as the night before and they looked less than amused. They assured me again that they would roll more cars nearby, but they honestly didn't expect to catch anyone. They said that maybe I should consider moving the figure in at night, or maybe getting a motion detector for the front porch light before they left. At this point, my wife just wanted me to take down the decorations. They were unsettling to her, and the kids weren't exactly thrilled with them, and the idiots in the neighborhood just kept messing with them. I had heard her, but I was still pretty adamant that these were just isolated incidents, and that they would die down once the rest of the neighborhood put the decorations up. She told me fine, but I could tell she wasn't happy with me. I promised that if something else happened, I would take them down. She said not only would I take them down, but I would have to get rid of them. I agreed. For the next few days, things were fine. I felt like I had vanquished the teens with the increased police presence. The decorations didn't move again. My kids warmed up to them, especially when I added some fun lights around them to lighten up the mood. Even my wife had to admit that things were better. Around a week later, I went out in the morning for work, and I noticed that the strand of lights I had decorated the skeletons with had been removed, but they weren't exactly gone. Somebody had tied them into a noose. I didn't tell anyone, I just grabbed it and I tossed it into my car. That night, I decided to stay up late to make sure that nobody was fucking with me. I'm not gonna lie, for a minute, I thought it might be Tim. Maybe he was just really intimidated by my design. But I pushed that away as being crazy. Our rivalry was fun, not anything too serious. Tim was a nice guy. He had been to my house. His wife had amazing lemon bars. I was just paranoid. Around 1 in the morning, I heard footsteps coming down the sidewalk in front of my house. It sounded like somebody was running, and the dull sound rang in the night air. I thought it might be the kids returning to mess with my things. I moved to the living room window, and I peered out into the darkness. It took a minute for my eyes to adjust to the dark, but when they did, I noticed that one of the witch skeletons had been missing. The kids were back at it. I needed evidence this time, so I knew I was going to have to record them in the act. showed the local cops that I wasn't crazy. I walked out of my back door as quiet as I could be, and I pulled out my cell phone. Like the other night, I wanted to sneak up on them, but unlike the other night, I did not want to scream at them. I got to my gate and I slowly opened it. I nearly passed out. The witch skeleton was standing there. I fell back and I dropped my phone onto the concrete. I let out a little yell, but I stifled it with my hands. For some reason, I expected the skeleton to move, but it just stood there, the empty eye socket staring forward. I stood up, dusted myself off, and slid past the skeleton. I hit record on my camera and I prayed my scared yelp and scared away the teens. When I got to the end of my house, I edged my phone around the corner and I looked at the screen. I was expecting to see a few teens laughing and moving shit around. The camera lens struggled to focus, and when it finally did, I didn't see any teens. There was no laughing. There wasn't anything. All of the decorations were gone. I walked out from behind the house confused. I stumbled over to the lawn and I saw footprints all over, but nothing else. Where the hell had everything gone? Just then, I heard footsteps running away from where I had come from. I ran around the house and I stopped, stunned. The skeleton that was standing near my gate was gone too. I felt a chill go down my spine. Maybe, just maybe, there wasn't any neighborhood kids messing with me. I heard what sounded like a cackle coming from my front lawn, and that's when I saw orange in the reflection of my car's windshield. I walked back to my front yard and saw that my lawn was on fire. Only it wasn't just a random blaze. It was by design. It was a cross instead of a circle instead of a triangle, just like the one that was on the trunks. I grabbed my hose and was going to spray the fire, but as quickly as it had turned on, the fire went out. I heard a faint cackle again. This time it sounded like it was on my roof. I didn't want to see if anything was there. I ran back into the house and I locked all of the doors. I stayed up for hours. The following day I was a wreck, but I didn't want to scare my family. I told my wife that she was right. Those decorations were weird and I decided to take them down last night. She was happy at first, but then she looked out the front window and she frowned. Really funny, she said, flipping me off. I went to the window and I opened it wide. They were all back in the same place that they had been, except the two witch skeleton skulls had been turned. One faced my front window and the other was looking off down the street. I felt a chill run down my body. All day at work, I couldn't shake off what had happened. I googled the cross instead of a circle instead of a triangle picture, but I didn't find much at first. But 20 or so pages into the search, I found something that made my heart race. And the webpage said that the drawing was related to witchcraft. Specifically, it was a symbol often carved into the coffins of witches that had been burned at the stake. But these symbols were old, like 1600s old. It was thought that the symbol would keep the witches' remains from acting up again. If the coffins had been opened, the witches would be free to cause havoc. As long as they were sealed and marked, things were fine. But if they were released, my mouth went dry. I felt my eye twitching, my stomach churning. I left work early, barely able to give my boss a reason for splitting at noon. I rushed home to an empty house. I wanted these things gone before my family was home. I grabbed the trunks and I dragged them into the front yard. I started disassembling the bones and throwing everything inside of those trunks. I know it sounds crazy, but I could feel them staring back at me as I tossed them back into the trunks. As soon as I had finished packing everything up, I saw Tim walking towards me. He had stayed home from work too, and he asked me what was going on. Oh, the kids didn't like these, too scary. I decided to take them down. And they were pretty realistic. Plus, kids in the neighborhood were messing with them every other night, moving them around and shit. I just don't want to have to deal with that anymore. Tim started laughing. Oh, that makes sense now, he said. I thought I saw one of those things walking down the street the other night. What? Oh, I came down for a glass of water and it looked like one of them was walking down the street. I was spooked out at first, but I realized that it was crazy. It was probably those kids moving them around. I forced a smile, but I wanted to die. Yeah, they were giant assholes. I found them all over. I think I'm gonna wait until closer to Halloween to put my stuff out. I don't want you to look out and see a mad scientist strolling down the street at midnight. I forced a laugh. Hey, he said. If you don't want these, can I take them off your hands? I really admire the craftsmanship. I wanted to win the decorating contest, but not that bad. I feigned a frown. Ah, dang man, I wish you would have asked me earlier. A buddy at work has already taken them. Oh damn, at least they're going to a good home. Yeah, I guess. I slammed the gate to my truck and I said goodbye. I drove back to Shade's house and, not surprisingly, she had moved out. The place looked as sinister as it had before. Worse now because it had been abandoned. Whatever, she is getting these things back. I backed my truck into her driveway and went to go get rid of the trunks. When I opened the gate, I felt a pain in my stomach and my head started pounding. Normally I would have been laid out by the pain, but I followed through it and quickly unloaded the trunks into Shade's empty driveway. I didn't care how they landed, only that they weren't near me. I thought that I heard one of them crack when it hit the ground, but I didn't stick around to find out. I hopped back into my truck and I took off. As I drove away, I glanced in my mirror and I swore that I saw the skeleton witches standing in the driveway. Maybe I was seeing things, but I didn't care. They were gone and out of my life. Things were fine for the rest of the month. Halloween had came and went. The Johnsons won the decorating contest again and my family had an amazing time trick-or-treating. My wife was pleased that the skeletons were gone and I just tried to forget that they were ever there. Things went back to normal. What's odd though, is every so often when I'm up late and the wind starts to howl, I swear to God that I hear cackling.